You ever get that feeling in your gut, the one that doesn't scream, doesn't shout, but just sits there? Quiet, heavy, unshakable. I had that feeling the night I found his little black notebook. No, not a cliché diary or anything dramatic like that. Just a plain, leather bound thing I found tucked behind one of his old blazers in the guest closet. He wasn't careless, he was methodical, too methodical, but that day he slipped just once, and that was all I needed. My name is Vivienne Hart, 50, CEO, investor, mother of none by choice, married for 17 years. And until that moment, I truly believed I had a partner for life. I believed in our vows. I believed in the kind of love that works through the darkness, not plots beneath it. But love doesn't always rot loudly. Sometimes it decays in silence, behind expensive smiles and polite dinners. Behind I love yous that feel automated. He had written down timelines, steps, names, a private lawyer I didn't know about. Meetings, he even made notes about my emotional patterns, like I was some kind of stock portfolio he'd been analyzing. Likely to break down, not retaliate, use softness, gain sympathy, file when she's out of state, cold, calculated, cruel. I sat on the floor for hours. My knees went numb, my breath shallow. All I could hear was the hum of the refrigerator down the hall, and the brutal echo of every memory we had ever made together. The man who used to trace my collarbone and whisper poetry had turned me into a business strategy, and somewhere deep inside, a switch flipped. I didn't cry, not then, maybe because some part of me had always known. When you've built your entire empire from scratch, when you've had men in suits laugh in your face before signing malt, $1 million checks, you learn to smell a setup. I just never thought it'd come from my husband. I closed the notebook, hid it back exactly where I found it. And that night I laid beside him like nothing had changed. He slept like a baby. I memorized his breathing pattern. And at 3:14 a.m., I turned my head and whispered into the dark, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." The next morning I called my team. Not my assistants, not my inner circle. I mean my firewall. The people I had quietly placed in my life for exactly this kind of betrayal. Wealth, you see, makes you paranoid, and paranoia makes you prepared. By noon I had spoken to 2 forensic accountants, a silent attorney on retainer, and the offshore consultant I hadn't used since 2012. No questions, just clear surgical instruction. Move everything quietly, legally, fast. He didn't notice a thing. Not while I packed his lunch the next day. Not while we had wine with friends that weekend. Not even when I forgot to wear the necklace he gave me for our anniversary. I had turned into someone else. Silent, watching, calculating, but oh, I smiled. I smiled so sweetly I could have won an Oscar. I moved $500 million in assets across 8 countries in 4 days. Trusts, holdings, stocks, real estate. Everything legal, everything airtight. By the time he would realize it, the money wouldn't just be gone. It'd be untouchable. Not hidden. Just moved with a paper trail so clean it sparkled. Then, like clockwork, a week later, he filed. He came home with roses, said he wanted to talk, told me he loved me but we'd grown apart, said he wanted to separate amicably. I smiled and said, of course. I even made him tea, jasmine, his favorite. He had no idea I knew everything. No idea I'd already spoken to the very lawyer he thought he'd blindside me with. The paperwork came the next day. I signed nothing, just smiled and waited. 3 days later, the panic began. His lawyer called mine in a frenzy. There's an issue with the assets. Yeah, no kidding. Turns out, you can't split what you no longer control. Turns out, planning to gut your wife financially only works if she's not smarter than you. He started losing it. blaming his team, calling banks, accusing people. I watched him unravel like an old sweater thread by thread. And when he finally sat across from me, eyes bloodshot, jaw clenched, voice trembling as he whispered, "What did you do?" I leaned in and said softly, "I protected myself. That's all." He thought he'd play the game, but I invented it, built it, scaled it, broke it. He tried to divorce me like I was some housewife who'd cry over shared memories and give him half. But I didn't cry, not for him, not for the 17 years I lost, and definitely not for the man who buried our marriage behind a balance sheet. You want to know the most painful part? It wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't the lies or the plan or even the notebook. It was the realization that he never saw me as me, just a stepping stone, just a jackpot, a woman he thought he could outsmart. But he forgot one thing. I wasn't his wife. I was his lesson. You know, in the days that followed his panic spiral, I noticed something strange. He got quiet. Not the kind of quiet where someone's thinking or trying to come up with a solution. No, this was a man slowly realizing he'd been playing chess with someone who saw 15 moves ahead, someone who wasn't even on the same board anymore. His texts came less often. No more "let's talk" or "we need to figure this out," just one-word messages. Cold, hollow, eventually he stopped calling altogether. I wasn't surprised. That's the thing about men like him. They love power until they're not the ones holding it. Then suddenly they become ghosts, shadows of who they pretended to be, and the funny thing is, the world still saw him as charming, generous, a victim of an aggressive divorce. Poor guy. Can you believe she froze him out, frozen? No, sweetheart, I buried the ice beneath him long before he stepped onto the lake. And I didn't just walk away clean. I walked away whole, which is something he'll never be able to say again. But I'd be lying if I said that was the end of it. Because when a man like that loses something as massive as his financial control, his pride doesn't just take a hit, it detonates. And when pride explodes, desperation kicks in. That's when they stop playing smart and start playing loud. He started leaking things to people we knew. Subtle things, implying I was unstable, cold, controlling. That maybe he was the one who had suffered in silence for years. I could see it in the way people began to talk to me. Little tilts of the head, soft voices, the way some of them looked at me like I was a villain in a designer dress. But I didn't flinch because I knew something none of them did. He was unraveling from the inside. His story was a sandcastle, and the tide was coming in. He was losing clients. Investors pulled back. Some quiet rumors started floating that he might have legal issues coming his way. Something about tax inconsistencies. Maybe a conflict of interest. Maybe fraud. And through it all, I said nothing. Not because I was weak, but because I wanted him to feel what silence really sounds like, the kind of silence that suffocates, the kind that makes your own thoughts turn against you in the middle of the night. I remember 3 weeks after he filed, we bumped into each other at a charity gala. Of course I knew he'd be there. I wore red, not just any red. Power red, custom gown, minimal jewelry. Hair up, smile sharp. When I walked in, I felt the entire room shift. That kind of presence isn't bought. It's forged. In betrayal, in planning, in perfect execution. He saw me, froze. I didn't blink. Just walked past him like he was a stranger I hadn't met yet. That night I got a message, a long one, rambling, apologizing, blaming stress, saying he didn't know what came over him. That maybe we could talk, really talk. That maybe, if I wanted, we could undo all of this. I laughed. Not because I thought it was funny, but because men like him never apologize for what they did. They apologize for what they lost. And he had lost everything, not just the money, the image, the control, the illusion that he could mold me into something soft and silent. That was the night I realized something else. He hadn't just planned to betray me, he never loved me in the first place. At least not the real me. He loved the version of me that made him look good. The one who smiled at fundraisers, stood beside him in interviews, made the home feel warm while he schemed in shadows. But the version of me that stood alone, sharp and unbothered, that version scared him, threatened him, and in the end ended him. It's strange, isn't it, how love can turn into something else so slowly that you don't even notice the shift. One day he's bringing you coffee in bed, and the next he's calculating how to gut you financially without leaving fingerprints. But I didn't just survive, I rose, and that was always the part he forgot. I wasn't his asset. I wasn't a line on a spreadsheet. I was the empire behind the name. I was the hand behind the signature. I was the storm he thought was just a breeze. Now, I sit in a glass office overlooking the skyline he once claimed he conquered. My phone buzzes with deals he'll never touch. My lawyers, still joke about how clean the execution was. And sometimes, late at night, I look out at the city lights and think, he thought I wouldn't see it coming. But I did, and I didn't just see it. I outplayed it. I wasn't always this woman. The one with the marble floors and glass offices. The one who moves $500 million with a whisper and doesn't lose sleep over broken promises. No, there was a time when I was just a girl with a worn-out laptop and a dream that barely fit in my apartment. A time when I ate canned soup for days and cried in parking lots because one rejection letter felt like the whole world collapsing. I built my first business out of desperation, not strategy. I didn't have investors or networks, just grit, just teeth. I met him at a pitch event. I remember it like a scar. He stood there, perfect jawline, expensive watch, laughing at something one of the venture guys said. He wasn't the type to notice someone like me, then hair pulled back too tight, heels worn down, a presentation that crashed halfway through. But he did, or pretended to. He was charming, confident, and most dangerously, he listened, or seemed to. He asked me questions about my vision, about why I believed this company would matter. No one had ever asked me that before. They only wanted numbers, projections. He wanted the why. That's how it starts, isn't it? Not with fireworks, but with soft words that feel like safety. We started dating, fast. It felt like finally someone saw me not as the underdog, but as a woman worth betting on. I let him in, I let him close. He helped me polish my pitch deck. He introduced me to one of his old mentors who ended up becoming my first real investor. For a while we felt like partners. We got married 3 years later in a private garden in Italy. No cameras, no press, just us and the few people we thought mattered. He whispered vows that melted me, promising to build something bigger together. I believed him. God, I believed him. But somewhere around year 7 things shifted, subtle at first. He stopped asking about my work. He used to light up when I'd land a deal, then it became a passing, "Oh, nice," over dinner. I brushed it off, said he was tired, said he had his own pressures, but it continued. He started calling my team your little company. Even when we were pulling in 8 figures, he told me to take more time off, to relax, to let the money work for us. But when I asked him to do the same, he'd say, "That's different." Different how? I knew then, though I wouldn't admit it, that he liked the idea of me, ambitious, intelligent, sharp, but only as long as he remained the sun in our universe. When I became the galaxy, he started shrinking. And when the articles came, Forbes, Fast Company, Fortune naming me among the top female founders of the decade, I saw something in his eyes I couldn't unsee. Not pride, but panic, and that's when he started pulling away. He traveled more, became vague. I found strange gaps in our financial records. Accounts I never signed off on, but I didn't confront him, not then, because part of me still wanted to believe that maybe he was just going through something, that maybe love was enough. It wasn't. Love is not a shield, not against greed, not against entitlement, not against a man who sees your brilliance and decides it threatens his own. The real betrayal didn't happen in a single moment. It happened in hundreds of small, quiet ones, like when he accidentally left me off a real estate deal that we had discussed building together, like when he moved our shared investments into separate names without a conversation, like when I overheard him telling a friend that Vive's success is just luck meeting timing. Luck? I bled for this, I clawed for this, and when I found that notebook tucked behind his blazer, I knew that every ounce of my doubt had been real, that this man, this husband, had been studying me like a rival company, waiting for the perfect quarter to pull the rug out. But he made a critical mistake. He thought I wouldn't notice. Worse, he thought I wouldn't fight. You see, when you've survived boardrooms full of men twice your age who try to drown you in condescension, when you've been underestimated so many times you can smell it from across the room, you learn to prepare in silence. You don't scream, you don't announce, you strategize, and I did. Every quiet dinner where I acted calm, I was moving chess pieces in my head. Every morning kiss, I was drawing up firewall clauses. Every soft touch, I was downloading data, checking accounts, calling people under pseudonyms. He thought I was sleeping. I was studying, and when the time came, I didn't flinch. I moved the money, I locked the trusts, I restructured the holding companies. I built a fortress from the ruins of my loyalty, and he never even heard the hammer swing. People say revenge is best served cold. I disagree. Revenge is best served in silence, when the person you're serving it to doesn't even know they're being devoured until it's far, far too late. It started small, a canceled lunch meeting, a cold response from a potential investor, a former colleague no longer returning his calls. At first, I assumed it was coincidence, that maybe the business world was just finally catching up with his lack of integrity. But it wasn't coincidence, it was consequence. You see, when I moved the money, I didn't just relocate assets. I untangled myself from every deal, every joint venture, every company we co-managed, quietly, legally, with surgical precision, and without me, his empire had no backbone. He was flash, I was foundation. The moment the money moved, the confidence moved with it. He didn't understand that investors don't trust charm, they trust stability. And I was the stability, the reason those deals ever closed in the first place, the reason the rooms stayed silent when he walked in. Not because of his charisma, but because of the woman standing beside him. Without me, he was just noise. And the world began to realize that, one by one, the dominoes fell. A tech startup pulled out of a merger. A luxury condo development stalled mid. Funding. His strategic partners ghosted. No explanation, just silence. And I didn't have to say a word. I didn't send a single email. I didn't need to, because smart people talk. And the smart ones knew. If Vivienne pulled out, something was wrong. He tried to pivot, of course, rebrand himself as a solo operator, a new firm, a new logo, a new narrative, but the desperation bled through. The cracks were too visible, and the ones who stayed, they wanted blood, not business. It got ugly. A lawsuit was filed, something about misrepresentation. I wasn't involved, but I read about it in the trades. He tried to paint it as a misunderstanding, but the story stuck. And suddenly his name, which used to carry weight, became something people whispered cautiously in corner offices. It should have satisfied me, watching him sink, but it didn't, not entirely. Because in the quiet aftermath, when the drama cooled and the smoke faded, I was left sitting in a house that echoed with absence. Not of him, God no, I didn't miss him. I missed the version of myself that once believed in something soft, something warm, someone to grow old with. I missed the version of Vivienne that hadn't needed bodyguards and legal walls around her life. There's a loneliness that comes with strength. No one tells you that. They tell you to be powerful, to be independent, to protect your empire. But they don't tell you that sometimes at the end of a war, you look around and realize you're the last one standing. And it's quiet, beautiful but quiet. I started seeing a therapist, not because I was broken, but because I refused to let the poison linger. Betrayal is a wound, but it's also a teacher, and I wanted to learn. I wanted to know what it was inside me that let him in, that ignored the signs, that stayed too long. We unpacked everything, from my childhood watching my mother give up her dreams for a man who left anyway, to my early 20s starving myself to fit into boardrooms that still thought I was too much, to my marriage where I dimmed my light just enough to make him feel tall. It was painful, but it was also cleansing. I came out of those sessions lighter, not softer, but clearer. And that clarity changed everything. My business took a new shape. I started investing in women-led ventures, quietly funding startups that had been told no, one too many times. I joined a foundation that helped survivors of financial abuse rebuild their lives. Turns out my story wasn't unique, just hidden. I wasn't alone, and that changed me. I went from reactive to intentional, from protected to proactive, and then one day, months later, I ran into someone unexpected, not a man from my past, but a man from a different world entirely. He was sitting alone at a gallery showing, quiet, thoughtful. Not flashy, not performative. We struck up a conversation about a painting, something abstract and chaotic. He said, "It's wild, but it's honest." Like someone finally let the truth spill out without caring how it looked. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I had never heard someone describe me like that before. We didn't rush. I didn't fall. I observed. I listened. And this time I brought all of me to the table, the battle. Hardened strategist. The girl who once dreamed in broken apartments. The woman who rebuilt herself from the ashes of a forged love. And he didn't flinch. He admired it. We're not a fairy tale. I don't believe in those anymore, but we're something else. Real, no games, no leverage, no balancing act of egos. Just two people whole on their own, deciding to walk next to each other instead of on top of one another. And that's worth more than $500 million. There was a night, about 2 years into the unraveling, that I'll never forget. It wasn't dramatic, no shouting matches, no slamming doors, just silence, the kind of silence that presses in on you like water in deep ocean trenches. I was sitting in the corner of our massive living room, a glass of untouched wine resting on the table beside me. The only light was the flicker of the city skyline beyond the windows, distant and cold. He was in the study, probably drafting another strategy, to edge me out. I didn't care. I was too tired to care. I'd just come from an all-day meeting where investors grilled me harder than ever before, skeptical of my ability to lead while my personal life was apparently collapsing. I felt like I was carrying 2 worlds on my back, and both were cracking beneath me. In that moment, I broke. Not in a burst of tears, but in a quiet collapse of the walls I'd built so carefully around my heart. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old photos, wedding day smiles, early days of laughter, vacations where everything felt endless and easy. I felt utterly alone, like the only person in a packed room who no one really sees, and that's when the thought hit me, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe I never was. It was the darkest I've ever been. But that night, through the fog of doubt, something shifted. Not because of some grand revelation, but because I realized something simple yet profound. I am my own foundation. If I crumbled, everything would fall apart, not just for me, but for everyone who believed in me, who had invested in my vision, who looked up to me. I was the architect of my own destiny, and if I let him break me, I was giving him the power to write my ending. So I didn't break, I rebuilt. The next morning I woke up early, poured myself a black coffee, opened the ledger of every asset we had. I started calling my most trusted people, the ones who understood that loyalty isn't about blood or vows, but about respect and truth. We started weaving a new safety net beneath me. That night, when he came to bed, I was different, cold maybe, but unbreakable. He tried to reach me. I pulled the covers tighter, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Months later, when he realized the empire he thought he owned was no longer his, I caught wind of his desperate plan to crawl back, to seduce me with apologies and promises. His old charm resurfaced, smoother but hollow. He wanted me to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could fix things. But I wasn't a child who needed comforting anymore. I was a queen guarding her throne. There's a story I want to share because it reminds me why my fight mattered. A year ago, I met a woman named Clara at a conference. She was young, brilliant, and just as blindsided by betrayal as I had been. Her husband had siphoned money from their joint account and vanished. She was devastated, terrified, and utterly lost. We talked for hours over coffee. I told her everything, the secrets, the strategies, the heartbreak, and the triumph. She listened. Then she smiled a small, fierce smile and said, "You made me believe I can fight back. That's why I do what I do now. Why I invest in women like Clara, because we are the storm they never saw coming. And if you're listening to this story, maybe you've felt the sting of betrayal too. Maybe you're sitting alone in a dark room wondering if you're enough. Here's what I want you to know. You are more than enough. You are your own fortress, and no one has the right to take that away from you." Clara's story wasn't just a story. It was a reflection, a glimpse into a painful truth many women face but few speak about. When we first met, she was still trapped in that fog of disbelief. She told me how her husband's betrayal hit her like a freight train. Not just the financial loss, but the crushing blow to her self-worth. How she questioned every choice, every moment, every ounce of trust she had given. But what struck me most was her spark. Beneath the exhaustion and tears, there was a fire that refused to die out, a determination to rewrite her story, no matter the cost. I took her under my wing. We pored over legal documents late into the night, dissected financial statements, and crafted a plan that would not just protect her but empower her. I introduced her to my network lawyers, financial experts, counselors, women who had fought similar battles and emerged victorious. Watching Clara transform was like looking in a mirror, but with a hopeful twist. She went from broken and overwhelmed to fierce and focused. She started hosting workshops for other women in her city, sharing what she'd learned. Her story began to ripple outward, touching lives I could never have reached alone. It made me realize something profound. My journey wasn't just about revenge or reclaiming what was mine. It was about building a legacy, a sisterhood of strength and survival, a community where women no longer had to hide their pain or fight in silence. Meanwhile, my own life kept moving forward. I rebuilt my business with a new mission, one rooted in justice, empowerment, and truth. I started investing in startups led by women who had faced obstacles similar to mine. I funded scholarships for girls in underserved communities who dreamed of breaking glass ceilings. Each step I took was a defiant shout against the betrayal I'd endured. Of course, the past still tried to claw its way back. He wasn't ready to let go, not quietly, not without a fight. He launched a series of legal battles, attempts to discredit me, and public smear campaigns. But by then, I was no longer the woman who sat silently in the corner nursing wounds. I fought back with facts, with truth, and with unwavering confidence. The courtroom became another arena this time, with me as the undisputed champion. Every lie he threw, every accusation, every desperate plea was met with evidence, grace, and steel. I wasn't just defending assets. I was defending my dignity, my name, my life's work. And when the final verdict came, it wasn't just a victory in court. It was a reclaiming of power. The courtroom was cold, sterile, but I wasn't there to be comfortable. I was there to be heard, to be seen, to finally lay bare everything he tried so desperately to hide. He sat across from me, eyes burning with a mix of anger and disbelief. The man who once whispered promises now spat accusations, trying to paint me as greedy, manipulative, even unstable. It was a script he'd rehearsed countless times, but this time I wasn't the one caught off guard. I leaned forward, my voice steady, unwavering. "This isn't about money," I told the judge. "It's about justice, about recognizing that betrayal cuts deeper than any financial loss. It's about standing up when the world expects you to fall." Piece by piece, I dismantled his case. I presented evidence, emails, bank statements, witnesses. I showed how I had acted within the law, how I protected not just myself, but the shared ventures that depended on my leadership. The truth was on my side, and it shone brighter than any lie he could tell. The room held its breath. At one point, he looked directly at me, desperation flashing in his eyes. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded. "We were supposed to be partners." I smiled, cold, sharp. "I was your partner. You chose otherwise. The judge's verdict was clear." My assets remained intact, his claims were dismissed, but more importantly, the world saw the truth. I wasn't a victim, I was a victor. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt a weight lift. Years of pain, doubt, and betrayal dissolving with every step. But the victory wasn't just legal, it was personal. I had reclaimed my identity, not as a wife betrayed, but as a woman unbreakable. From that day forward, I vowed to never let anyone else define my worth. The victory in the courtroom was more than a legal win, it was a rebirth. Walking out of that cold building, I felt every step solidify the woman I had become, no longer defined by betrayal, but by resilience. My empire was intact, yes, but more than that, my spirit was unshaken. I wasn't the woman who had once doubted, feared, or bent under pressure. I was Vivienne, fierce, deliberate, unyielding. Life after that trial was a new chapter, one I embraced with open arms and a guarded heart. I rebuilt not just my business, but my entire world on terms that honored my strength and truth. I surrounded myself with people who celebrated my victories without envy, who understood my scars but never saw me as broken. The power I once feared losing became my shield and my gift. The journey wasn't easy. Healing never is. Some days the memories still whispered, shadows of the past flickering at the edges of my mind. But those whispers no longer controlled me. I chose when to listen, when to speak, and when to let go. More importantly, I chose to give back, to use what I had learned, what I had built, to lift others from the ashes of their own betrayals. Women like Clara, who remind me every day that strength is born from struggle, and that together we can rise higher than any one of us could alone. So if you are listening now, if you have ever felt the sting of betrayal or the crushing weight of loss, know this: you are not alone. Your story is not finished. You have the power to write your own ending, fierce, unstoppable, and unapologetically you. Because revenge is not just about retribution. It's about reclaiming your life and your truth. And that, my friends, is the greatest victory of all. Every morning now, I wake up to a quiet house filled with possibility. The city skyline outside my window reminds me how far I've come, not just in dollars or deals, but in spirit. My routine is deliberate. Meditation, journaling, then diving into work that fuels me, not drains me. I choose projects that ignite passion and uplift others, not just balance sheets. I've learned to trust again. Not blindly, but wisely. My circle is smaller, but it's real mentors, friends, and partners who see me wholly, beyond titles or money. We share victories and failures without judgment. That's the kind of strength I crave now, honest, vulnerable, and fierce. And love, that's a chapter I'm still writing. It doesn't look like a fairy tale, and I don't want it to. It's built on respect, honesty, and the freedom to be exactly who I am. Someone once told me love is a partnership of equals, and I believe that now, because I've learned what equality really means. Most days when I speak at events or mentor women starting their journeys, I see myself in their eyes, the doubt, the hope, the hunger for more. I remind them, your past doesn't define you, your pain doesn't weaken you, your power is waiting just beneath the surface. And when I hear their stories, the betrayals, the losses, the battles, I know this truth. We are not broken. We are becoming. This story, my story, is proof. It's a testament to the strength that lies in rising, in reclaiming, and in refusing to be anything less than who you are meant to be. So to anyone out there who feels lost or betrayed, hear me when I say, your time is coming. Stand tall. Hold fast, your empire awaits. Every morning now, I wake up to a quiet house filled with possibility. The city skyline outside my window isn't just a view. It's a reminder of how far I've come, not just in terms of wealth or success, but in terms of who I am at my core. Each day, I choose to live intentionally. I start with meditation, grounding myself in the present, reminding myself that my past doesn't control my future. I journal not just to record my victories, but to explore my fears, my hopes, my truths. My work has changed too. I no longer chase deals for the sake of deals. I seek projects that light a fire in me, that allow me to lift others as I rise. I invest in women, led businesses, fund scholarships, and support organizations that help survivors reclaim their lives. This is my legacy, one built not only on financial empire, but on empowering others to find their own power. Trust, once shattered, has been carefully rebuilt. I've surrounded myself with a smaller circle people who see me fully, beyond titles and money, friends and partners who celebrate my successes without envy, who hold space for my vulnerabilities without judgment. It's a different kind of strength, the strength that comes from honest connection. And love, that chapter is still unfolding. It's not a fairy tale, and I don't want it to be. It's built on mutual respect, honesty, and the freedom to be wholly myself. I've learned that true love is a partnership between equals, not a balancing act of give and take. And I'm grateful every day for the chance to experience that kind of connection. When I speak at events or mentor women who are just beginning their journeys, I see a reflection of myself in their eyes, the doubt, the hunger, the fierce determination. I remind them that their pasts don't define them, that their pain doesn't weaken them. Their power is waiting beneath the surface, ready to be claimed. Their stories of betrayal, loss, and survival echo my own. And in that shared experience, I find hope. Because we are not broken, we are becoming. This story, my story, is proof. Proof that strength can rise from heartbreak, that betrayal can be transformed into empowerment, that a woman can reclaim her life and rewrite her destiny with courage and grace. So if you're listening, if you've ever felt lost or betrayed, know this. Your time is coming. Stand tall. Hold fast. Your empire awaits. So here I stand, not just as a woman who survived betrayal, but as one who rose above it. A woman who took heartbreak and transformed it into a legacy, because revenge isn't about destruction, it's about reclamation. Reclaiming your worth, your power, your story. If you're out there feeling the weight of someone else's choices, remember this: your strength is already inside you. It's been there all along, waiting for the moment you decide you're not a victim, but a victor. No matter how dark the night, the dawn will come. And when it does, you'll rise stronger, wiser, unstoppable. This is my truth, my victory, my message to you. Stand tall, own your story, and never, ever let anyone else write your ending. Because the woman you are becoming is worth every battle fought. And trust me, your empire is just beginning.